Hello there. Welcome to What Would Aristotle Do? This is the second in the series of videos where I take a look at the four cardinal virtues of classical virtue ethics. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the intellectual virtues and prudence or practical wisdom in particular. Strangely enough, I've done a lot of thinking about what Aristotle calls the intellectual virtues over the years. I thought of them as types of knowing rather than virtues, but when I read book 6 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, I immediately recognized the correspondence between my categories of knowing and the intellectual virtues. Aristotle starts with things that are true, that is, facts. Now, Aristotle says that there is a part of the soul that has the virtue of being able to work out things that are true. He calls it the scientific intellect. Both he and I think that knowing what's true is important. He uses the example of medicine. If you don't know what remedies to take, then you can't make yourself well. Aristotle says that things that are true are invariable. That is, they don't change according to the situation. 2 plus 2 is always equal to 4. Now he says you should not spend time deliberating about things that you can't change. However, in Aristotle's time, there were severe limits on perception that meant that the things that it was possible to know were correspondingly limited. They could only really get to know things it was possible to work out through direct observation. They did manage to figure out that the Earth was a sphere, and came up with a pretty good estimate of its circumference. They lived in a Newtonian world, so they could have potentially figured out Newton's laws of motion, although when you think about the first law of motion, which is that an object in motion will continue in motion at a constant speed in a straight line unless acted on by an external force, is an amazing intuitive leap when you look at the world around you. If you throw something into the air, it drops to the ground in an arc. If you roll a ball on a flat surface, it slows down and stops. Newton was a pretty smart guy. Now we have these amazing tools like the James Webb telescope that enable us to look back in time to the early universe. I'm a great fan of Dr. Becky's YouTube channel where she showcases so many amazing discoveries that are being made through the images from the WWAD. What these discoveries are revealing is that we don't understand the universe at all, and I find this rather comforting. At the other end of the scale, we have the Large Hadron Collider, which allows us to study the smallest possible particles in the universe through the rather crude mechanism of smashing larger particles into each other and seeing what fragments emerge. Here too, there are hints that our current understanding of the fundamental particles that make up the universe, the standard model, may be incomplete. I think that what our modern understanding of science shows us is that the more we know, the more we find out that there is to know. There's a great quote from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. It goes like this: "There is a theory which states that if ever anyone discovers exactly what the universe is for, and why it is here, it will instantly disappear and be replaced by something even more bizarre and inexplicable. And there's another theory which states that this has already happened." All of the above goes to show that it is worth deliberating over things we think are true. Now, just in case you think that all of this is theoretical, let me give you one example. The GPS on your phone would not work without Einstein's general theory of relativity, and the chips that decode the GPS signal would not work without our understanding of the quantum behavior of electrons. If you are not a research scientist, however, it's sufficient to live in the Newtonian world. It's not worth spending time over deliberating over whether the earth is flat. It's not. You only have to get on a boat and sail 20 to 30 miles out to sea to prove that. There are other kinds of knowledge that are more complex. For instance, if I roll a conventional six-sided die 100 times, I know that I will get a 6 about 17 times. It might be a few more than that, it might be a few less. I know that it's possible that I don't get any 6s at all. There are parts of real life that are like this. They are not things that are true or false, but where the outcome can only really be measured in probabilities. These can either be things that are truly random, as far as we know, like the path a photon takes in the double slit experiment, or the decay of an atom of uranium, or they can be things which are not random, but where the large number of complicating factors interact with each other in such a complex way that the only practical way to model it is through probabilities. Throwing a die is one of these. Another is side effects in medicines like vaccines. A particular vaccine might cause life-threatening side effects for 1 in a million people that take it. On the upside, it might save 10,000 lives for every million people vaccinated. Medical professionals might declare that the vaccine, by and large, is safe, which is a very virtue ethics stance, by the way. Some people might focus on the 1 person in a million that died and say, "You killed that person with your horrible vaccine." The epidemiologist would say, "Well, what about the 10,000 lives that were saved?" The problem is that no one knows which 10,000 lives were saved, whereas they know exactly which person died. The next level of knowledge is understanding. This is when you have knowledge of enough things in a particular field of study to become an expert. You would have excellence in that domain. Now, the ancient Greek words arete or agathos can both be translated either as excellence or virtue, which is interesting, I think. Through understanding, you are able to make judgments about what is the good in the domain that you understand. For example, if all I know about sailing is that the front of the boat is called the bow and the back of the boat is called the stern, then I just know 2 things. If, however, I know that some boats have a very pointy bow where the stem, which is another name for the bow, meets the water at a very acute angle, and other boats have a bow which goes straight down and meets the waterline at 90 degrees, and I know which boat will go faster and which will be more comfortable when the sea gets rough, then I am well on the way to understanding what distinguishes a boat that is good for going fast in calm waters from a boat that is good for crossing oceans in rough weather. Separate to knowledge and understanding, but very closely linked, are skills. I can watch 1,000 YouTube videos about learning to play a guitar. I can learn what chords are and how one chord follows another to accompany a singer when performing a song. I can learn that in order to play Into My Arms by Nick Cave, I need to play the chords C, F, G and D minor in such and such a sequence. I can learn that in order to play a C chord, I need to place my 3rd finger on the 2nd string at the 3rd fret, my 2nd finger on the 3rd string at the 2nd fret, and my 1st finger on the 5th string at the 1st fret. And then strum all the strings in such a way as to make all of the strings from the 2nd to the 6th sound. I can know all this, but until I actually do it and practice moving my fingers from the C chord to the F and then back to the C many, many times until I don't even have to think about where the individual fingers will go, I just think C and my fingers fall into place on the fretboard. This is the difference between knowledge and skill. And this, by the way, is also the answer to the Mary's Room philosophical thought experiment. Experience is different from knowledge in just the same way as skills are different from knowledge. Moving on to wisdom and to prudence or practical wisdom. Now, I prefer the term practical wisdom to prudence. Practical wisdom sounds like something positive. It sounds like wisdom that has an application in the real world. Prudence, to me at least, sounds like caution. It sounds like settling for less than you might be able to achieve. Maybe that's just me. What do you think? Wisdom is defined by Aristotle as a complete knowledge of a particular domain. That means that in order to be wise, you have to have a true understanding of the first principles, and you have to know all of the things that follow from those first principles. Things that are first principles are not provable. They have to be arrived at through intuition. For example, 1 + 1 = 2 is a first principle of arithmetic. I believe that Bertrand Russell spent an entire book trying and failing to prove that 1 + 1 = 2. However, once you have understood that 1 + 1 = 2, then it is relatively easy to derive all addition and multiplication from that first principle. It is possible to have a different kind of mathematics, where 1 + 1 does not equal 2. There's a kind of mathematics where 1 + 1 = 1. Now you might say, well, that's crazy. What possible use is a mathematics where 1 + 1 = 1? Well, it turns out that this mathematics, which is called Boolean algebra, is incredibly useful in computing, and in fact almost all computer programs use it. Now I am cheating a little bit here. Correctly I should say 1 or 1 = 1, but it is often written as 1 + 1. According to Aristotle, a person can be wise in a particular domain, like poetry or plumbing, or they can be thought of as generally wise. I think that we call people who are wise in a particular domain experts. People who we would call just wise, I think, are wise in the arena of human relations. They are the kind of people you would go to if you had a problem, either in a particular situation with a particular person or group, or more generally, a problem with the way that you relate to people in your life. The wise person would know whether the situation was resolvable or not. If it was resolvable, they would be able to give you just the right kind of prompt or insight that would change the way that you thought about the problem and move forward with your life. Now, I'd say that somebody like Esther Perel could be described as wise in this sense. So, what makes practical wisdom different from just wisdom? The most important thing about practical wisdom is that it's wisdom with a vision, a goal, and a plan. A vision is an idea of how the world will be different when you have done the thing that inspired you to change the world, even in a small way. The vision inspires you and any fellow travellers to keep going when you encounter the inevitable obstacles along the way. The vision has to be a good one. The world has to be better when you've achieved what you want to do. If this is not the case, it's not practical wisdom, it's just cleverness. For example, if your vision is to retire to a Caribbean island that you have bought by scamming people with crypto meme coins, Aristotle would not count this as practical wisdom. The goal, then, is the change that you are going to make to achieve the vision. Invent a drug that allows people to lose weight with minimal side effects. Established Scotland as a socialist utopia. Again, the goal has to be a good one. If your vision is to lift everyone in the United Kingdom out of poverty, which is good, but your goal is to establish an authoritarian surveillance state like in 1984, then this would not count as practical wisdom. Interestingly enough, under a utilitarian view, this might be acceptable if you can convince yourself that the reduction in suffering adds up to more than the reduction in happiness. For virtue ethicists, it's clearly bad, as it reduces the opportunities for human flourishing or eudaimonia, which for us is much more important than mere hedonic pleasure. The plan is a sequence of steps to reach the goal. The steps in the plan must make sense to those involved, and completing a step must result in believable progress towards that goal. In addition, the plan should be good in the don't be evil sense, although virtue ethicists do recognize that sometimes trade-offs will have to be made to achieve a goal. Unlike the Kantians, who would say that you have to follow the rules come what may. If you have practical wisdom, you will also be prepared for things to go wrong on the way to the goal, and have some ideas about what you should do if one of those things happens. Of course, the more unusual the thing that you're trying to do is, the more likely it is that things will go wrong on the way. If you have a plan to meet your friend at your favourite coffee shop, and when you get there it happens to be closed, then you can always either go to another place or go another day. The stakes aren't that high anyway, so the wise person probably wouldn't sweat it. By contrast, if you are trying to build the world's first nuclear fusion reactor that produces more energy than it consumes, you can safely say that lots and lots of things that are totally unexpected will turn up out of the blue to get in your way or push you off track. Indeed, when you start, there may be quite a few problems that you don't know how to solve from the outset. Part of the plan will be figuring out how to do these things. In this case, you would need a good way of dealing with issues as they arise, and it would also be wise to try to identify things that might go wrong before they actually happen, and then try to do something that makes sure that they never do. Now, in my experience, the hardest thing to do is to keep your eyes on the prize and not let all the setbacks divert you from your goal, so you end up going in a completely different direction. And I've seen this all too often in my professional life. You can have practical wisdom in different domains of life. A doctor should know what actions to take to find out what is wrong with someone, and then know what actions to take to cure them if possible. A theatre impresario will know how to put on a successful show. One of the traps that it is easy to fall into is assuming that if you have practical wisdom in one area of life, that you will automatically be successful in another. I was a reasonably successful leader of software development teams, but I don't think for a moment that would make me a good lieutenant colonel or major in the army. People can also show practical wisdom in their professional lives, but not in their personal lives. I certainly found that professional success did not result in an improvement in my ability to navigate personal relationships. Reflecting on it now, I think that my problem was a lack of understanding of myself. Hopefully I'm a little better now, but you'd have to ask my friends and family about that. To sum up, you can see that the intellectual virtues are composed of a number of layers. The foundation layer is knowledge. This consists not just of knowing things that are true, but also knowing things that may be true, with a good idea of how likely they are to be true. Understanding builds on knowledge in such a way as to mould a collection of facts into a coherent whole. When you have knowledge about how to do something and then practice it, you develop skills. Understanding a lot or even everything about a domain gives you wisdom. And applying your understanding in a way that can change the world is practical wisdom. Well, I hope that gave you some food for thought. If you have anything you'd like to share, especially if you think I've missed something, please leave a comment below. I do read them all, though I might not respond if you're rude. If you've got this far, thank you for watching What Would Aristotle Do? The next episode will be on the application of practical wisdom to the political situation in the United Kingdom.